Hello friends, this is Lada and welcome to the last and final webinar 14 of series 3 of my Earthshift webinars. In this webinar, we get to discuss the multidimensional, the higher dimensional, metaphysical, esoteric, spiritual matters, catalysts and predictions, and this is my favorite of the series. I know I should not be playing favorites, but here it is. And the reason it is my favorite is because I get to share with you the particulars and very interesting secret details of my theory of cycles and 20-year periods, and I will give you some secrets, some details, some interesting bits and pieces that I did not share before. I also get to talk to you about the dawn of the age of Aquarius, the galactic dawn, and things that we discussed in previous webinars, such as my predictions and how they will play out in the next 6 years, how the transition from period 8 to period 9 happens, and how it's all related to astrology, how all these catalysts, how all these indicators, which a lot of people misunderstand or do not quite know much about, how all they play together, how they mesh together to create a beautiful tapestry of life, a beautiful tapestry of the multidimensional universe, and how we're transitioning to higher dimensions, to higher consciousness, how all this is playing out, what is good and what is bad, how to prepare for the future, and as well as practical predictions, such as real estate predictions, such as relocation predictions, etc., etc. This is why this is my favorite webinar, and this is why I'm concluding with this webinar, our new series. I promise you, whatever I say or don't say today, there will also be more we will be discussing in my future Patreon posts and Q&As, and I plan those as well for you guys on Patreon, who are my patrons, who are my supporters there. And there's lots more to come, including workshops starting in 2021. But don't tell anyone, this is still a secret. Okay, so without further ado, let's go into the webinar. And I want to tell you first why it's harder and harder to make predictions nowadays. And it was easier before, and also how I make my predictions. So why it's harder to make predictions in 2019 and 2020 than ever before? And as you know, I've been predicting events both in people's lives as well as in the lives of countries and the entire world for a long time. But publicly, I began making them in 2010, 2012, and then it all exploded and I took it to the next level in 2014. And all those predictions I made since 2014, they are continuing to come true, except a couple that have been delayed or somehow played out differently. Well, the track record speaks for itself, and my main predictions, my main body of work from 2014, that's what we're dealing with right now. Right now, it is all playing out. And at the time, it was a lot easier to make short to mid-term predictions, as well as, of course, long-term predictions, because we had the timeline. It was all going according to that timeline and according to that avenue of the future, because there are potentially different futures, of course, but that future was easily visible, easily predictable. After 2017, and especially in 2019 and 2020, is getting harder and harder to see short to mid-term. And the reason for that is that we have these incremental timeline changes that continue happening in our world, incremental shifts. And now these shifts are becoming bigger and bigger as we get into the tectonic plate shifts, which I described to you since 2014. I predicted this would be happening. And tectonic plate shifts between areas of the world, between worldviews, between ideologies, as well as approaches to how the world should be. And historically, it's been like this in the times of great change. But we are in a time of the greatest change since 1,000 years ago, of which I will tell you a little more later. So what we are seeing right now is that these tectonic shifts, they're not only between ideologies, these clashes of the old and new, something that is outmoded, outworn, and something new that is coming in. The old doesn't want to release its privilege, and the new wants to try to grow further, wants to strike out of the confinement it was in. And all this is creating these tectonic shifts. Also geographically we have tectonic shifts. Tectonic plates are moving. Like, for example, the usual east and west, right? East-west. And those countries stuck in between, which by definition are Eastern European and technically also Central European countries, they're stuck between these tectonic plates, and so they are experiencing a lot of pressure from both sides. Case in point is Poland, Ukraine, Czechia, Slovakia, Bulgaria, countries like that. So, because all this is happening simultaneously, now also there is a lot of disinformation, because each party is trying to create their own narrative, their own idea of the world, and they lie. They outwardly lie, openly lie, and some are just confused. People are confused. There's a lot of emotional confusion. There is a lot of confusion as mental that is going on, and masses of people don't exactly know what they're doing. The worst thing is that leaders of various countries have no idea what they're doing, and all this, what I just described, gets deposited into the psychic space of our planet. And me, I'm an empath, so empaths feel everything 1,000-fold, 1,000,000-fold. It depends on the degree of the empath. And my claircognizant ability, which is knowing, it is based on the avenue on which we travel to the future. So if those avenues get obfuscated, or various groups, various elites, various countries, they make it deliberately a point to confuse everybody. During this time, this is info war, basically. Info war, hybrid war, internet war. Everybody is pulling in their own direction. So all these confusions, they create a very, very muddled reality in which we exist. And this is why it's getting harder and harder to predict short to mid-term. Well, I explained this to you because I want you to understand that what I'm telling you later in this webinar not only is what I predicted in 2014, which were long-term predictions, but also I'm giving you short to mid-term predictions, and these are based on systems, and you cannot fool a system. You can probably fool emotional side of the empath, maybe even claircognizant side of the empath, when everybody is depositing conflicting information, but you cannot fool the system. And system exists because the entire world of ours has a structure, and everything is structured in our world based on time, because we are a 3D realm. We, humanity, humans and planet Earth, we exist in the 3D realm, and we are starting to transition slowly into lower 4D realm, where time works a little bit differently, but it still works approximately the same way. Okay, so because of that, we can fool a lot of things, but we cannot fool the structure of time. And that's what I'll be talking to you about. That's going to be my system of 20-year periods, which is one of the most valuable tools for determining which way we're going and how everything will be evolving in our world today, and 20 years and 40 years from now, and how historically and why historically something evolved this way or that way. And another system, of course, astrology, while nobody knows and understands, and hardly, just like, I don't know, maybe 100, 200 people who ever listen to my webinar 4 understand what the system of periods actually means, and maybe a few dozen, not even, maybe a few people around the world actually even know of this system's existence. It's created by me based on Eastern astrology, Eastern numerology, feng shui, and esoteric sciences of the East of China, a system of elements, etc. I'll tell you more later. Well, and very few people understand about the age of Aquarius, and even fewer understand about the galactic dawn. And I will tell you about all these things. So first, I want to tell you why 2020 is such a transformational year. It is actually unbelievable. I'm sure you all feel that. That's in addition to this catalyst, to this sudden catalyst of change. There is COVID-19, and now it's COVID-20, and then it's going to be COVID-21. We also have US elections and widening polarization and clash between different factions within the US, and US being the number one still for the time being superpower of the world actually exerts a lot of influence on everybody else, whether you live in the US or not. If you live in the West, if you live in the East, China, Russia, Latin America, Africa, Asia, anywhere you live in the world, Australia, of course, Canada, you are under influence of the US one way or another. Less, more, it depends, right? So because of that, we have sort of like the past, present, and future colliding. We have all these emotional, mental confusions and confusion of the elites, wrong decisions made by elites, elites trying to somehow adjust, populations trying to adjust to the new reality, and all this is what's accompanying what's happening in the US. Now, coronavirus, COVID, right? And then slightly related to that, as well as related to all the tectonic shifts and uncovering of the truth and awakening, all these riots and revolts. I'm not going to enumerate those for you. You know what's happening and where and how. And those riots, revolts, discontent, demonstrations, they're happening all over the world, but especially in the West, and also in countries that require huge changes right now, but primarily everywhere in the West. Not every country, there are countries that are immune to that for whatever reason. They're very stable. But what is happening though is that in the US, again, France, UK has its own story going on with Brexit, and then Belgium, for example, which is the headquarters of the EU, by the way. All these countries are in turmoil. Right? In Germany, there are all kinds of protests and demonstrations, but Germany also is a different country, very different from others, and it has its own dynamics. I will tell you later about what's happening. Now, there are global wars, and these are hybrid wars: economic war, trade war, tech war, right? So there are rift between European and US allies, which will continue widening. And just now there has been Merkel made a pronouncement that EU is taking its own independent path, independent of the US. So, of course, trade wars with China. And with Russia, it's oil and gas war, right? All these wars are conducted by the US, not some other party. It's the US that is at the forefront of all this, that is spearheading this turmoil, global turmoil, which is accompanied by the global change. And the reason for that is, while Russia is the great balancer, the US is the great agitator. This role of the great agitator was played in previous eras by different countries, such as Great Britain and, of course, Germany in the 20th century as well. Now this role has passed almost fully to the US, and not only US agitates because it's the waning empire, but also it's the yang world, the yang realm of our planet, the most yang by far. It agitates everybody, including its own allies, and it challenges its own allies, thus distancing those allies from itself. So all this is also happening because of the earth shift, and where it's shown is in the system of my 20-year periods, which we will discuss next. Now, of course, info and internet wars, again, the culprit here, the initiator, is the great agitator USA, but everybody is drawn into it one way or another. Info wars are conducted by the US against primarily Russia and China, also against Iran, to a degree, a little bit against Venezuela, but those are lightweights compared to Russia and China. Internet war started between US and Russia. I will have a separate article for you guys on Patreon on that. I'm not gonna stop at this. I will just say that based on this internet war, there could be fracturing of the internet, or if there is no fracturing of the internet, which Russia is resisting very hard, but US keeps pressing on it, US keeps like pushing Russia towards drastic solutions, and because of that, Russia may become the challenger of the existing internet and create the internet that where people will flock. And so there will be fracturing of the internet one way or another, which is probably good because people will have choices. They can go to the Russian internet. I'm personally very seriously considering it because I'm very dissatisfied with venues such as Facebook, for example, and YouTube. I deal with YouTube, but I never really got into it. There's so much negativity there. So there are Russian venues that are not lesser known, but they are higher quality, they're better designed, and I might be considering going in that direction very soon. I will be posting announcements of my new social media when that actually transpires, and many other things. So this will be discussed in the article because it is a pretty big topic and interesting topic. And of course, we're going now into astrology. 6 eclipses this year, highly unusual. Usually it's 4 eclipses, that's the norm. 5 eclipses is high, which is what we had last year, where I believe it was also 6 eclipses. 6 eclipses this year. Next year we'll still have 5 eclipses. And after a while it will start winding down. So eclipses are in fact the harbingers, they are accelerators of change. Now we have many retrograding planets right now. We actually have 5 retrograding planets out of 8 that can retrograde at this moment, but just a few days ago when Venus was also retrograding, we had 6 retrograding planets out of 8. And there are 10 planets, what is considered planets in astrology. Sun and Moon never retrograde, so only 8 planets can actually retrograde. Can you believe it? So I was like, pretty much everything, the entire sky is going backwards, eclipses, all this at the same time. And we will talk about that in a little bit. And now, in addition to everything, we have the culmination of period 8 and everything period 8 embodies. And then what happens is that period 8 develops, goes up, and then culmination at the high point, and then it starts going down and winding down, and at that point it intersects with the future period 9, which is when we see the preview of period 9, and that's already happening right now. We're beginning to see the preview of period 9 and what period 9 will be about. So whatever you see right now, make a note of everything that strikes you as interesting or unusual or important, and we will be discussing a lot of these things during this webinar, because you are seeing, my friends, the preview of what's to come in the following 20-year period, period 9. And what is period 9? That's the last period of the 180-year cycle, when everything wraps up. Everything. And so while period 8 is also the wrap-up period of the previous 180-year cycle, in order so that we could begin the new cycle later. So during period 8 is culmination of the entire 180-year cycle, and period 9, its completion. It's like wrapping up of everything that happened, wrapping up of karma, wrapping up of spiritual growth and spiritual situation for that, material growth, everything, so that we could again begin period 1 later, and then it's a new leap. It's a new direction for humanity oftentimes. So wrap up of karma, which is what's happening between now and period 9. And you will see that the same exact thing is predicted by the stars, by astrology. This is why I included astrology in this, because it is uncanny how the same period actually works as a wrap up of the old and the beginning of the new. And so what we are discussing in this specific webinar are 4 major elements. There are metaphysical, multidimensional, esoteric elements that are catalyzing the earth shift. And we are talking about the dawn of the age of Aquarius, number 1, the galactic dawn, number 2, period 8 to period 9 transition, number 3, and astrological movements that also tell us a story that is short-term to mid-term and predict quite a bit. With astrology, you usually cannot predict long-term. That is, these are domains of my other predictions: claircognizant, clairvoyant, and empath predictions first and foremost, and of course the age of Aquarius, the galactic dawn, as well as periods of mine. That's what predicts future longer term. And astrological movements really help us predict future in the short term and a little bit mid-term. Like so astrology is great for something like 2 to 10 years. We are taking the time frame of 6 years between 2020 and 2026. And that's going to be discussed later in this webinar, so stay tuned. And I want to tell you in this part 1 about what is the age of Aquarius, what is galactic dawn, and I will also remind you about forbidden history. As you know, we had a full series done on forbidden history where I do talk about the galactic dawn and the dawn of the age of Aquarius. Well, first I discussed galactic night and how that evolved. So I dedicated almost like half of a webinar to discussing all these things and explaining how that works, and how there were lost 1,000 years of history, and Russia the Great Balancer history, and how all that happened, how all that evolved. So please listen to Forbidden History webinars. That's series 2, and it is on 50%, I believe 50% off sale, while series 1, which is equally or even more important, that's on 60% sale for participants of this webinar. All your links, sale links, are at the bottom of this page on which you're listening to this webinar. If you already purchased it, it's a great idea to re-listen whenever you get the chance, maybe during some lazy summer afternoon, weekend, during the summer when you're traveling, perhaps you can re-listen, and you can again go and because you might discover new things there that you did not see or did not feel before. Some reminders, great reminders, and these two series 1 and 2, will be relevant for a number of years to come. So please do not forget to listen to them. Okay, so what is the galactic dawn? The galactic dawn basically happens when we're changing from the galactic night to galactic day, and it is the time in between. Galactic night and galactic day actually last for 1,000 years, each of them. And we were in the galactic night since approximately 9th, 10th century until the 20th, beginning of the 21st century. So we are actually in the galactic dawn ever since the end of the 20th century, and right now galactic dawn is in full swing, which coincides with the Great Earth Shift. In fact, the Great Earth Shifts happen about every 2,000 years, coinciding with the ages, astrological ages. So we were in the Piscean age for 2,000 years. Each age that lasts about 2,000 years is divided into the nighttime, 1,000 years, and daytime, another 1,000 years. In fact, each of them is less than 1,000 years, because dusk lasts for, if not a century, at least half a century or longer, and then the dawn lasts just as long. Therefore, each age, we were in the Piscean age, now we are transiting into the Aquarian age. Each age is 2,000 years, or a little less because of dusk and dawn, right? And each galactic night and day lasts 1/2 of that term, okay? With dusk and dawn lasting up to a century each, okay? Okay, so what is the ruling side of the world for the galactic night? It was the age of Pisces, right? With half of it galactic night, the latter half between 10th and 20th century. The earlier time century 1 AD to century 10 approximately, that was Galactic Day. Okay, it started dusking in 9th, 10th century. The ruling for 1,000 years, almost 1,000, because it's very gradual. You know, you have to understand that everything is gradual. It's not like boom, it happened. Okay, if you observe the skies, dusk and dawn last quite a few hours, like 2 hours, oftentimes 2-3 hours, right, out of the day. So that's what we're seeing. It's a pretty significant period of time. During dusk and dawn, it's a more balanced situation between sides of the world, between yin and yang. But because we live in polarized world where yin and yang are separate, listen to my previous series 1 and series 2 of webinars to understand my theory of yin and yang and how it applies to the world. Because we live in 3D, that kind of world, lower 4D is still the same actually. It transfers everything, all the conflict into the area of the mind, or a lot of conflict into the area of the mind, a lot less physical conflict, but it's still yin-yang separated. And so while the Galactic Day favors countries that are the Ra countries, Ra, sun, right? God of the sun. Galactic Night favors countries that are the night countries. And what are the night countries? That's the West, where the sun, what? Sets, where the sun sets, is the sunset countries. So the West is greatly favored, and that's why the West was the this engine of growth, UK, then USA, the quintessential West of the world. They have been at the forefront. Meantime, the countries of the sun, and that's first of all Russia, right? And other countries that are associated with the sun in any sort of way. Global South, that's Africa, Latin America, and a lot of Southeast Asia. Global South have been poor countries, right? Okay, so Global South and Russia, poor countries, or countries that are suffering, right? So Russia has been the great balancer that has to take on all the brunt, the entire brunt of all the conflict in the world, and strain for years to keep the world so spinning at its expense. Russia had to operate at a disadvantage, huge disadvantage. Nighttime is not good for Russia. It's the Ra country, the quintessential Ra country. Okay, so incidentally, in Russian, West is called Zapad, and Zapad, that means where it's falling. So meaning the sun is falling beyond the horizon, is disappearing beyond the horizon. So that's the name. Actually, it just came to me, Japan. The rising sun, right? And this red sun on white, actually bad combination of colors, red and white, they clash actually. Same goes for South Korea, more or less. Okay, so now we're in the Galactic Dawn. What is Galactic Dawn? People were asleep during the night. Now they're awakening. Look at this, look at what everybody talks about. It's the awakening, time of awakening, right? Or there is this movement called woke movement, woke. Or people say, I'm awakened, right? When they believe that they understand what is happening in the world. So these words are for a reason. It's dawn, guys. Everybody is awakening. And that's what Galactic Dawn is. Now, what is the age of Aquarius? And how it works together with everything else. And the age of Aquarius, as I said, is every 2,000 years. The age of Pisces is waning. This is the end of the age of Pisces. When we talk about astrology, astrological indicators later in this series, in this particular webinar, I will tell you how everything is wrapping up so neatly and beautifully. So age of Pisces is wrapping up. we are not only in the galactic dawn, we are also in the dawn of the age of Aquarius. And the age of Aquarius is a completely different energy. Everything that we're seeing right now, internet, all this global village, even globalization, guys, in its own ways, this global trade, what the new Silk Road, what Russia is trying to do, unite like Eurasia, or Europe, as Russia says, from Lisbon to Vladivostok, uniting Europe, uniting Eurasia, all these cooperative movements, eco-villages, everything. There are so many of these signs. It's all the dawn of the Aquarian age. This is what Aquarius is about. Also this interest in esoteric, interest in aliens, interest in astrology, in my Earth shift theory and metaphysical movement, great rebalancing, and also these riots. That's also the negative manifestation of of the dawning age of Aquarius, and it is also period 8 manifestation and period 9 manifestation, which will be happening a little bit later. So what you will see throughout this webinar, I will explain to you how all this is correlated, and I'm not going to say Earth shift and great rebalancing very much here, because I talk about it all the time, and I told you more, and I used these terms of mine more in previous webinars. But rest assured that the great rebalancing and the Earth shift, they happen every 1,000 years, and then there are micro shifts and micro rebalancings that are happening every few hundred years approximately. But the big great Earth shift is happening every 2,000 years, which means it coincides. Basically, the Earth shift happens when the age changes. We change the age. When there was the age of Aries or Taurus, major shift happened while it switched. Taurus age, so Aries age, huge shift. Aries age to Pisces age, humongous shift. And they sometimes last for centuries, these shifts, guys. So the Aquarian age, the overall shift is happening over approximately 200 years. However you look at it, but approximately anywhere between 150 and 200 years, the full shift. And the same is true for the Earth shift. The Earth shift will only be completed when we're fully in the Aquarian age. And that should be accompanying, because we're wrapping up karma during the age of Pisces. We are still wrapping up that karma, and that's why during this dawn the truth is surfacing. It's like everything is surfacing, everything that those forces of dark that dominated, forces of dusk that dominating during the Piscean age, which also has its huge positives and huge negatives, right? Going within, going within spiritual, the highest manifestation of Pisces is spirituality. High spirituality is cosmic self. I'm a Pisces myself, by the way. I know everything about Pisces. It's a beautiful oneness with the universe. It's going well beyond ego. It is also wrapping up karma. It is transmuting karma into something really wonderful, beautiful, cosmic, higher dimensional, spiritual. But the dark side of Pisces is escapism. It is going so deep within that you're like really stuck in the dark somewhere, including it could be something like depression, for example. Also, it can be like, us versus them, and distrust of the universe, and being too detached from the universe, from reality of things. That's a danger for Pisces, to be too detached, too separate from everything, because this world, you are not of this world. So you somehow we have to learn, all of us, to be in this world but not of it. In other words, be balanced. You are part of this world, but at the same time you are higher than this world. You are spiritual being. You're not stuck in this minutia of things that some forces are trying to impose on us. You're not too materialistic, for example. You balance your desire and reality. You want to live well, obviously, while you are here incarnated. You want to be happy, but your happiness transcends material. Your happiness should go into spiritual, into self-development, into things that are quintessential higher dimensional Pisces. Okay, so all this I hope is understandable, and we will be clarifying, and I will be talking more and more about this as we go along, as we're continuing in this webinar. And without further ado, I will be proceeding to part 2. So stay tuned, don't go away. So much more coming your way in this webinar.